MTC Solutions is a mass timber hardware supply company. Big difference for us is we actually know what our hardware can do structurally. So we provide the hardware and we help with engineering, consulting to structural engineers that are touching mass timber for the first time or have advanced questions such as yielding performances, particular ductilities, fire resistance, interstory drift, shear walls, timber concrete composite systems, and things like that.
This is the Mass Timber Group Show. I'm Nick.
And I'm Brady, and we talk to sustainable building experts. Today we caught up with Max Closen, the president and founder of MTC Solutions, a global leader in mass timber structural hardware.
MTC has over 600 real-world mass timber projects under their belt. They are currently pushing the industry forward with publicly funded research on fastener and structural hardware fire performance.
But before we jump in, we're helping AEC professionals learn to build with mass timber so they can change the world with their projects at the next Mass Timber Group Summit taking place in Denver. Save your seat by clicking the link in the show notes below. So with that, let's get into it.
I am one of those people that is trapped in the wood industry because I don't know anything else. I need to do everything right because working in the wood industry or mass timber is the only thing I can do. So I can't screw up any relationships. So I need to do my best to not screw them up. I grew up, my dad was a forester in Germany. And we lived pretty remotely in a dedicated house for my father as the forester. And so we, spent a lot of time in the woods, building tree houses, hunting, riding bikes and dirt bikes and, tractors and stuff. And I got, attached to wood very early because we had to chop firewood, building the tree houses. And my dad was a woodworker in his spare time and hobby. So I got exposure to woodworking very early. And when I was 15, I told my parents that I quit school, didn't want to go to school anymore. And my dad was like, okay, good. So what are you going to do? I was like, well, I want to become a carpenter, right? So I was like, okay. So I went through the apprenticeship program for carpentry in Germany and did that for 5 years. And then I developed a little bit of a dust allergy. And I couldn't really do that anymore. And at that point in time, we were actually timber framing a house for a structural engineer. And I asked her a bunch of questions like, why do we have to put so many nails? And why do we have to do this? And, why this big beam and that big post and all of these things? And he explained those things to me. And I was like, that sounds interesting. So I asked him, where can I learn about this stuff, right? And he said, there's a, timber engineering school and just south of Munich in Germany, in Rosenheim. And that's what I signed up for. So, based on his recommendation, I went to this timber engineering school for 4 years and got a structural engineering degree in timber engineering. And then I came to Canada because I always wanted to see a moose, hunting, hiking, biking, and all of these things. I met a professor from my German university on the BC ice fields, which back then you could still hike on. And he was doing his sabbatical at UBC and introduced me to the timber engineering program here at UBC, which is focusing on, structural and earthquake engineering. So I went there, talked to the professor, and he was like, hey, I also have a scholarship for some research, right? And I was like, sign me up. So by that coincidence, I was fortunate and lucky enough to get a scholarship to study here in Vancouver in structural earthquake engineering in the timber engineering group at UBC, the University of British Columbia. And during that program, I got exposed to connection technology testing. And I was like, this is interesting. And we had, back then was a company called CST Innovation, Canadian Sustainable Timber Innovations. And they had the first CLT press, small 4x8 press. And that the owner of that company sponsored a bunch of CLT panels for my master research. So that's how we got into testing CLT connections. And since then, that's what I've been doing. I've been, testing CLT and mass timber connections since then. Obviously now I have, really good colleagues that help me with all of these things, but that's where everything originated. And, we gave presentations to local engineers here in Vancouver and we realized that they couldn't design any of these things because nothing existed, right?
Yeah. Well, I can definitely see how you landed in the wood world then. How did
Yeah.
you, how did MTC come to be together? Like, what do you guys do for now compared to what you were talking about then?
Yeah. I mean, MTC Solutions is a mass timber hardware supply company. Big difference for us is like we actually know what our hardware can do structurally. So we provide the hardware and we help with, engineering consulting to structural engineers that are touching mass timber for the first time or have advanced questions such as, yielding performances, particular ductilities, fire resistances, interstory drift, shear walls, timber concrete composite systems and things like that. So that's maybe what we do for the industry. We have helped develop many of the things that people use today. Design guides are available for download on our website, obviously, and there's a wealth of knowledge, white papers, blog posts. Lots of LinkedIn stuff goes out, I believe, once a week. We try to make content for the mass timber industry that lives online so that it doesn't expire, other than revisions for code changes and design changes. But in general, the concepts are applicable, based on kind of engineering mechanics, and they don't really expire too often, at least. So I think
Yeah, that's a very important role.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think what we touched on earlier already, the wording that I said that, timber structure is a bunch of loose sticks held together by connections. That's the important part of it. And again, I want to make sure that it's clear that I didn't invent this wording like this. I heard this for the first time from a structural engineer that I really respect, Ben Brungraver from Fire Tower Engineer Timber. He's a really inspirational gentleman with, I believe, close to 45 years or something structural engineering experience in wood. And he said that in one of his presentations, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that. And it stuck with me since then. And I've used it many times because I really like it.
So knowing that a mass timber building is just a collection of sticks held together with connectors, what's the most important aspect that people need to know about when they're putting these mass timber connections into their design plans?
So I guess, mass timber hardware or structural mass timber hardware doesn't grow on trees. So it has to be manufactured and made and quality controlled, similar to glulam and CLTs. And no one would ever call you and say, I need, 500 10 by 50 foot, 5-ply, 1,000 euro pine CLT panels next week and expect that you can deliver those. It's understood that these things need to be manufactured, quality controlled, machined, and get ready for construction and shipping. Similar for, much of the structured hardware, as the name implies, there's a structured hardware and there's a really intense quality control process behind all of these things. And quite some manufacturing is going on to make these products, in particular, the ones that, are 20 inches and longer or, half-inch diameter wood screws. Like those things are not growing on trees. They need to be carefully manufactured, carefully quality controlled, and carefully packaged and treated before they are ready for shipping. Similar to a mass timber glulam beam or a mass timber CRT panel, there's no difference there. And that seems to be something that is not quite yet understood when people call and they say like, oh, I need this and that next week in San Antonio, right? And we're like, we need 16 weeks manufacturing time to do that. So that's a problem then, right? And then the improvising starts, right?
So is it the engineer or are they the ones calling you, or is it the developer or the investor? Like, when do you normally come into the game and in the design phase?
Really depends on projects. Overall, obviously we work with structural engineers to make sure the specification works for what we have and what we can supply, with our technical service team. So the technical service team is basically, engineers that help other engineers understand what they do if they are not experienced yet, or provide the right resources. And mostly, I guess, we work with the manufacturers, installers, and general contractors. Those are the main people that we work with developers, not so much. Structural engineers, obviously, they work with us on the technical side, but they would not supply hardware packages. So I think we can nail that down to installers, general contracting firms, and the mass timber manufacturers. If there's shop installed, pre-manufactured elements and things like that.
So you're going to be dealing with a lot of different questions from, say, the structural engineer. How is your team equipped to answer those different kind of questions? You guys have engineers on staff?
Yeah, there's engineers on staff, people that basically internally crunch, numbers and do the work in the background. And then people that, communicate outwards into the industry as a first point of contact. But there is, licensed professional engineers here in the company that take care of the technical requirements that we have, so that we make sure we keep everything properly on record and we recommend the things that we are comfortable with, that we can, reliably.
Would you say that differentiates you guys from other providers, or what kind of makes MTC unique and stand out?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. As I said, in the end, we are, a wholesale company. We sell structural hardware, similar to a structural engineering firm sells structural engineering services, and architect sells architectural services. So we all got something for sale here, right? It's just for us, it's structural hardware. And that's what we do, with the addition that, if you ask us what our hardware that we sell can do structurally, we will be able to answer that for you.
Well, and you have over 600 mass timber projects under your belt. You're incredibly experienced. I mean, if people listening, please go to mtcsolutions.com, click on their projects, and it will absolutely blow your mind. But a couple really just fun projects that I know that you've worked with was especially the Spruce Goose, which, if people don't know, that's the funny side note. It was the largest plane ever built, but it was made entirely out of wood. So that's super cool. But Google, they bought this massive hangar where the Hughes H4 Hercules was built. And so you worked on that. And which is interesting, because a lot of times people are like, hey, fasteners and all this stuff, it's more like mass timber is such a new industry that they're all new projects mostly. But this is a very old project that you made beautiful, and now it's a big office space, right? Anything come to mind that with that project?
Yeah. I mean, in general, wood is not a new building material, right? And the village that I grew up in, the oldest single family home there is in a traditional oak timber frame, and it's about 1100 years old.
Wow.
And people still live in it. It's obviously crooked and there's lots of deformations everywhere, and creep has gone into all those beams and stuff, and they deflect by probably 4 inches or something. But people live in that building, and there's a family that lives in that building. So it's not a new material at all. And for the, that particular Spruce Goose hangar project, it's, a result out of the Second World War, where, no more steel was available to build airplanes and large structures similar to the Mossad airfield hangars, or those blimp hangars, or blimp planes. Those things were built in a time crush from local materials based on, engineering mechanics, without any finite element software or anything. So that was just, for myself, really interesting to have the opportunity to go into these buildings myself and see it and touch it and work with the engineers from Arup on those projects, and Fire Tower Engineer Timber on the Moffat airfield hangars, and be part of history a little bit. I guess that was kind of really inspired me to do that, because it's all traditional connection technology. There's nothing fancy in it. It's just really basic stuff that went into this, and getting these buildings a second life, or helping, a small contribution, is really, really interesting, so that a couple other generations can see this. And if we look at the Spruce Goose hangar, and I think there's room for 1,000 people in this office space, that's really good to show people how beautiful timber can stay for 100 years and still have a use for commercial applications.
Right. And there's another one of your projects that's just mind blowing. Me and Brady came from the the nonprofit world at the Boys and Girls Club, and you had worked at the YMCA, which is, more or less the same industry, helping out children, giving children a safe place, really. But the Shane Holmes YMCA at Rocky Ridge, Calgary, Canada, I had to look this up because it's unbelievable. It was $192 million donation. I'm not sure if you were
Yeah.
aware. It's incredibly cool there. And then so they built a 284,000 square foot YMCA, which is 26,000, square meters. And you also worked on that project as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, that was maybe one of the first real large scale mass timber projects in Canada, or I guess in North America in general. And just a real, experience to work with that construction schedule and this many different people and specialty engineers and, engineer of record, and getting all of these things figured out, and working with, back then, Structureland and their detailing department to figure out the tolerances for these large arches, and the repetitiveness of everything was, I believe, something that had not been done before in North America, right? Maybe not even in the world, to my knowledge. It was just really, obviously intense to work on it, but, some people that you work with on these projects are probably lifetime friends now, because all the suffering, was done
Right.
in a
The
team
truth is,
environment. Yeah. But, if you are ever in Calgary, like, that is a building that you must walk into. And it's just stunning. Every time we walk in it, it's like, wow, this is cool. This is a really cool project from the inside and also from the outside. If you, step back from the structure a couple 100 feet, you can see the Rocky Mountains in the background, and you can see how the shape of the building kind of like follows the shape of the mountains in the background. Like, also from an architecture point of view, it's some really interesting and, late landscape appropriate design for that kind of structure. Yeah.
Before we hit record, you were talking a lot about attracting really high skilled talent into the mass timber industry. And I think some of these buildings are a testament to like how cool of projects you get to work on. What else do you think is the responsibility of the people that are already in the mass timber industry to help bring more people into it so that the next generation picks up that mantle and carries forward?
Yeah. I mean, that's, everybody was, in my opinion, at least, everybody was a technical background, like be that an engineer or technician or, from that end, should consider the mass timber industry as an industry to put your energy, because it's for, one small portion of fighting changing climate, whether it is, man-made or not, doesn't really matter. I believe we can all say, climate is changing, for some reason, at least. And if you have to work your whole career anyways, or your whole life anyways, like, why not do it in an industry that is, full of people that have fire in their eyes, right? We have yet to meet, bad people in the industry. It's just not there yet. I never met a bad guy here in mass timber yet. And there's only people with fire in their eyes that put the energy because they want to. So I believe, inspiring as many people as we can to work on mass timber and dedicate their workforce and career for the sustainable building movement is a good idea. If that is happening in mass timber, it's even better, because that is, one area where the little bit of talent that we have, we can make a small, or possibly make a small change, contributing to a less impactful climate change problem. And, if people say like, oh, I can't do much, it's kind of true. You cannot do much, but, if you eat a lot of small potatoes, you will get full too, right? You don't need to eat 2 large potatoes. You can eat 15 small potatoes and you won't starve to death, right?
right.
So from that point of view, like, if, for myself, at least, I don't know much about things other than, connection technology, because that's what I spent my last 17 years in. So I guess the opportunity that I see for myself is like, I will dedicate my career to making this happen for mass timber. And that is then my contribution to the sustainable building movement, right? And that's something, maybe from that point of view, if you are a person with an engineering background or technical background in general, and you have children, your children will eventually ask you, hey, daddy, you are an engineer, or you understand the world, or you understood the world. And what did you do to fight climate change, right? And I just, for myself, I want something to tell my kids, because they will probably ask that question at one point in time once they are older, and ask me, well, daddy, what did you do? And I can say, I couldn't do much, but I did what I could. I helped with mass timber and brought mass timber connection technology forward with my team. And if I say, I helped with, like, I mean that, because obviously without the people in the company, you can't do anything, right? If it's just me, then my impact is very, very small. But if I can inspire 40 employees to work here and bring their energy here, then you get into exponential developments. And I believe that's something we can help with. And both Nick and Brady, you do that with the podcast, right? That's
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. It's a huge point too. Me and my wife are bringing in our first baby boy, first child into the world, February 4th. And gosh, when I, started, when me and Brady were, professionally kind of, out in Montana, we were buying and, holding and managing like duplex, triplex, quadplex, like traditional stick frame. And we both kind of looked at each other and we're like, listen, this is the future. Mass timber is now what's happening, and we vowed to move forward and develop only in mass timber. And so, it's interesting. You say, hey, you're doing your little bit, all these little potatoes, though. I think sometimes they add up, and it's a significant change in the world. Speaking about trying to change the mass timber industry and moving it forward, it sounds like that MTC got some public funding to do some fire ratings on fasteners. And can you kind of speak to maybe what the plans are, or what you're
Yeah.
trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the things that came to us very often, in US projects and Canadian projects, is the fire engineering. And obviously we work with a combustible material, and there's very little guidelines for appropriate fire engineering in Canada anyways. Like it basically reads one sentence in the code, and then it refers to either the Eurocode for further instructions, or, technical reports, American-made technical reports, which is obviously for Canada, where, a portion of the economy, or large portion of the economy, is based on lumber, timber, the wood industry, fiber industry in general is a little bit of a shame. So about 2 years ago, we started the process of obviously recognizing this, because we had engineering professionals reaching out to us for, hey, how do we do this? And we're like, oh, we don't know. I don't know. There's no guidance, right? So we started researching and found that there's very little guidelines, and the guidelines that existed are rather conservative because of the lack of testing. And because there was no proprietary nature in investigating this, no one has really kind of looked at this, right? Like, there's no point in any glulam manufacturer getting fire rating for their 1,000-year pine or spruce pine or Douglas fir glulam beams, because anybody else would kind of steal it, right? And then also have a 2-hour fire rating. So proprietary nature is gone. And we applied for funding here to the local provincial government in British Columbia, Canada, and they awarded us a bunch of money together with other agencies to do a 1-year project to develop 2-hour fire rated post and beam connections in different aspects. So there will be custom steel, wood to wood, aluminum systems, and cold formed steel systems, so that it's more or less applicable to the entire range of hardware that is for the industry. So we investigate different species, obviously, different char covers, and different bonded and non-bonded edge requirements. to make an appropriate 2-hour fire rated connection, at least one. We hope that we will get maybe 2 to 4 over the next 6 to 8 months with explicit testing that is not only like theoretical, but there's full load on the connections also, so that we have the real case that we would have on the building, like a poster beam structure with CAT panels on top, maybe a composite floor system or a concrete slab or some kind of floor loading on it, people, furniture and things like that. And we have the real loading of the connections on the connections during the 2-hour fire test. So
and
I think
you said that's over. I mean, is it go time right now, or you said about over the next 6 to 8 months?
Yeah, go time is right now. So I believe that the first burn will happen in early 2024, like mid to end January. That's where we are scheduled for now. So we are, I guess in close proximity of seeing some wood char. I purposely don't say burn, some wood char, because the big ULAM sticks, obviously they don't burn as kindling.
And then at the end of the testing, I mean, obviously depending on how things go, but then do you get like a certification with the government and the city, and then you're able to take those to the engineers, I'm assuming, and then it just kind of helps with the whole process, or what's the end goal of that?
Yeah. Interesting. I caught your word certification, right? So I believe, to my knowledge, there is no fire certification standard that is applicable for mass timber connections in particular. So that is one of those things where, we have a lack of standards and certification measures in the industry still, and a lot more work needs to be done there. Because how come we work with a combustible material and we know we need 2-hour fire ratings, not only for mass timber, but also for structural steel or other building materials, but we have no guidelines to test to, really. So that's obviously, if you say, is there a certification outcome for it? I believe that given that there is no particular standard that evaluates, a fail or pass, the best we can do there is to provide all of the information that we have in a public forum, so that engineering professionals can access this information based on reports that were written from recognized experts in the industry, right? And I'm not a fire specialist by any means. So we rely on, researchers, university professors and people like that to judge the results that we get. And they are deeply involved, obviously, in the entire process and helping us make the results as meaningful as we possibly can. And hopefully they can take many of the results that are generated to the code committees as well. And with that into, a mainstream design standard. Eventually, I say eventually because these standards take a long time to pass and go through, right? So if we say we do the testing now, then I believe by 2029 or 2030, there is a chance that there will be a clause outlining how this is done in the codes. But obviously the mass timber industry cannot wait until 2030, right? We need to build more sustainably now, not in 5 or 7 years from now. So by keeping the information public, which it is, everybody can access it. And then design professionals in the industry can apply their, professional judgment on what they can make out of this in terms of how big can we make a gap, how thick do we need the char layer to be in certain timber species, and how much load are we comfortable putting on the connection hardware if the temperatures on the inside of the connections didn't exceed, I don't exactly know what the number is, around 140 Celsius, roughly, depending on material there. So that's, I guess, where the outcome of that project would be.
So with the outcome of this project, you're basically open sourcing all of this research, all this information to better the entire mass timber movement. People that are listening right now, what's something that we can all do on an individual basis to help push that type of information forward?
Good question. I think if you have, a healthy amount of curiosity, that, brings you very, very far. If you're curious about these things, and then you start digging deeper and educate yourself about this to be able to make your own judgment, as a professional or as a, member of the mass timber industry in general. Um, and, demonstrate you have fire in your eyes, like without the fire in your eyes, nothing moves forward, right? Like you need to be curious and have those attributes to judge the information that you can currently get for your projects that you need to do. Because again, it is not written down in prescriptive standards for any scenario or for all scenarios yet. And that will probably still take, maybe for the rest of my work life to get this into a standard, like into a written.
Well, you got some work life left. You look young. You look, in the sense where it's not going to be a couple years, but more on like a 5 to 10 year trajectory. I know that you're really involved with this, fire safety to try and get these, this information out there. But what are you after next? Like, what is MTC trying to do, like on a little bit more of a long-term scale?
Yeah. Um, I mean, in terms of connection technology, I believe we are just at the beginning of what we can do or should be doing. We understand the basics of, fastening technology and connection hardware. But we do not really understand what these things can do in earthquakes. If there's multiple load cycles, there's, basic information out there about ductility and, envelope curves and things like that, but no detailed information is there for particular systems. In my opinion, we cannot even really build a master machine yet that is actually performing the way we would predict, because there's not a lot of testing available yet, in particular, not at full scale, right? I mean, you guys are aware of the 10-story shade table test and all of that. That testing is done, but it's probably going to take a year or two until we see some sort of, papers data that we can actually harvest from this testing. So I believe that is, next for us is to develop applicable, usable system solutions for many applications. That's the typical post and beam connection, the typical CLT diaphragm strap, fire ratings for connections, moisture management is a big deal in mass timber. Obviously, that has to be explored. And we just try to do the right thing and approach everything from, engineering view and do the appropriate testing so that we get the appropriate data. We analyze the data and then try to put that into a public domain, public forum for the design professionals in the industry so that they can build their own judgment on the things that they need to judge. Because they ultimately take the responsibility for the structure, right? We don't. They do. That's their job. And that's what they are good at. So that's what we'll try to aim for.
So there's so much data out there that people like yourself, other people that are working on the mass timber design build teams need to see, need to consume, need to learn in order to do their job well and to kind of push everything forward. Where do you go personally or professionally to get your information? Where do you learn from? What sources do you go to answer these kind of questions?
Yeah. So obviously we are pretty well connected with universities. So there is a variety of, research papers that you can always read. There's a lot of mass timber research going on globally, not only North America, but actually, Europe and I guess North America, the major research facilities that take care of this. So research papers are always a good point to start and find them. That is interesting to have. Then, all sorts of conferences like the traditional wood solutions fairs that we used to have. The Mass Timber Conference or International Mass Timber Conference is definitely an event that you should go to and talk to as many people as you possibly can. Podcasts are always interesting, all sorts of podcasts about sustainability from all sorts of angles is interesting. Um, Newsletters from the American Wood Council are interesting so that you can see the projects and what's going on. And, social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, there's a lot of content there. And if you poke around there often, obviously your algorithm will adjust and you will be fed a lot of mass timber related information or brainwashing, to keep you engaged in all sorts of topic with rich content. There's some really good things. Your podcast is something interesting because there's a large variety of people from all aspects in the industry. So that's something to,
Thank you. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with brainwashing if it's good for you. So start drinking from a fire hose. You can self-educate yourself in the mass timber world pretty easily if you just, go out there and search for it, just like you said. So before we ask our last question, where can people connect with you to talk more?
Yeah, obviously you can always go to our website, mtcsolutions.com, and poke around there, ask questions there. Then obviously we are active on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can email me directly if you have something interesting to ask. I'm pretty responsive on emails as well. And then, obviously we exhibit at, a variety of different shows. So that's always a good place to connect with the people from MTC Solutions. They're always there and are, happy to talk to you. If you are a student and you have interesting research going on, make sure you talk to your professor. Don't be shy. These professors also need inspiration and be poked some. And there's lots of interesting industry collaboration going on the research side for, valuable mass timber research that needs to be done.
Is your next big show in the International Mass Timber Conference?
I believe before that, there's an event in Calgary and in Ottawa here, north of you people in Canada. So I believe those ones are the ones that come up next. But then I believe the International Mass Timber Conference is the next, or the biggest event, I guess, in the year to go to and connect with the mass timber industry. So that will be again a good week to get your hands dirty and talk to the people that are actually in the industry.
Yeah, no, we look forward to that. It's massive. For anybody who doesn't know, that's the gold standard. That's the 800-pound gorilla in the world. And, we'll definitely see you out there and, go out to fly out to Portland and check that out. For the last question, if you had a magic wand and you can change one thing in the industry, anything that you wanted it to be, what would you change and why?
There's many things that looking back, we could change. And, sometimes it's an interesting thought to have, if I could be 10 years younger, but with the things that I know today, that would be a very lucrative environment to be in. Unfortunately, can't turn back time. So we need to, work with what we have today. And to me, I alluded to this earlier, the codes and standards are, still a problem. There's a lot of custom engineering going on. And I believe we are wasting a lot of resources and energy on redeveloping things that have already been done, but the information is not public or not shared, broad enough in a design code or design standard. So I believe I would try and work on developing codes and standards earlier for the basic things such as fire resistance ratings, understanding maybe drift performances earlier, and maybe understanding ductile behavior of connections a little bit better earlier, and try to promote things around those basic design criteria. But that is only, again, for, the structural hardware or building materials industry. If you ask a lot of other people, they will tell you a lot of different things, obviously. But that's, for me, where I believe if I put energy there, we could make some advancements and some changes, because that's what I've been doing for the last 13 years at MTC Solutions. So I believe that could be a good energy input.
Much needed. Well, it was a true pleasure, Max. Your projects are global. They're incredible, and we're excited to see with all of the information that you're going to have with the fire testing codes. Maybe we can do a short round 2 and kind of unpack a little bit of what you find. Thank you so much. And if we don't see you before, I guess we'll cheers a beer out in Portland for the conference coming up in Portland in March.
I'll hold you accountable for that beer. Yeah.
All right. Well, don't twist my arm. We'll make it happen. Have a good rest of your day. We'll talk soon.
That's good. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.